Before you watch this clip, it's worth bearing in mind that the officer involved is on the end of a 10-hour shift, and the perpetrator was later found with a knife. He was in an altercation with someone else. I don't know much about that incident, but I know the other guy was described as elderly. So that's something that's worth bearing in mind. But just watch this. And yeah, decide for yourself if you think that the officer involved should have been sacked for this incident. And the complaint that led to his sacking didn't come from the public or that kid or the kid's family. It actually came from one of the other officers involved in this incident.
You're under arrest! Get on the floor! Get down on the floor! Get down on the floor! Now! Get down! Show me your fucking hand! Show me your fucking hand! Now! Right! Stay where you are! Now!
I've done nothing!
Put your fucking hand behind your son!
I can't! I've done nothing!
Right!
I've
Listen!
done nothing!
Stop screaming like an
I
old
haven't
bitch!
done nothing!
Do you understand that?
What have I done?
Shut up!
Honestly, what have I done?
Right. We're going to
Roll over!
you.
No.
We need
Right!
Please.
You try resisting again! Do you understand? Right! Shut up! Now you try resisting one more time!
Right.
Get your fucking hand behind your back! Do you understand?
Listen to us. Listen to us.
One hand at a time! One hand at a time!
My fucking neck!
Then stop screaming!
I don't want you on me!
Okay, we're going to get you to your side in a minute, okay?
What have I
Yeah,
done?
can we have another unit? We've got to be able to take opposite that hotel.
Can you explain
He's
what I've
being a
done?
bitch.
What
Right,
have I done?
stop resisting or I'm going to smash you. Do you
What have I
understand?
done?
Put your hand
What have
behind
I
your
done?
back.
Can you explain? I have the right to know what I've done wrong.
We're going to explain that to you in a second.
Ow.
Don't resist.
Ow.
Right.
I don't want him
Stop
on me.
resisting.
Can I have... I'll do it. I'll resist. Get him off
Move
me.
back now. Right, stay where you are.
Right, listen.
You're under arrest at the moment on suspicion of assault.
Assault. He assaulted me. He assaulted me.
Right,
I promise.
do not move.
Oh, can I explain myself,
Right,
please?
1 second. 1 second. Right.
Please, can I explain myself? I'll tell you what
Yeah,
happened.
Bale's resisting. He's got some mates here.
I'll
We
explain
haven't
what
got the
happened.
Right. He's going to make off.
No, I won't. I
Put your hand
promise.
behind your
You
back and I'll let
make
you up. Do you understand?
You do not
Put
make
your hand
off.
behind your
Listen to
back.
us. Do not make off. We're going to put your handcuffs on you, all right?
I've done
Okay,
nothing,
right,
please.
fine.
He kicked me off the scooter.
Okay.
I didn't do. I was driving past me.
Whatever happened to It's a Fair Cop, Gov? I think part of the reason why a lot of people have like zero sympathy for that kid is there's just something really repugnant about the way you go from what you would imagine is like 5 seconds ago it would have been all bravado, and then the moment you get caught you were just like, oh, like didn't do, and it's just, yeah, I can't, you know, it's unbearable to listen to that kid screaming. It's fuck. And with the state of crime and antisocial behaviour in the UK at the moment, I don't think a lot of people would have been that bothered if he'd smashed his face into the pavement. But yeah, I think most people agree that the state of the UK police force at the moment is just, it's absolutely shocking. And there's an article here that I found by a guy, because this happened in Dorset. So this guy is a former chief inspector of Dorset Police. So we'll see what he has to say. So this guy has basically started a GoFundMe for the officer that got sacked. But I'll read you out the article. Over the past few weeks, public outrage has grown following the dismissal of PC Lawn Castle, an officer sacked not for using unlawful force, but for raising his voice while detaining a knife-carrying teen. Castle, an officer with over a decade of experience and multiple life-saving commendations, has since become a national symbol of everything that many believe is going wrong in modern British policing. The public's response has been unprecedented. Over £128,000 has now been raised for Castle and his family, a figure that speaks volumes about the disconnect between some senior police leadership teams and public sentiment. The man behind the fundraising effort is former Chief Inspector Chris Amy, a senior figure within Dorset Police who has now stepped forward to explain why he could no longer stay silent. In this exclusive interview, Chris shares why he launched the campaign, what really went on behind the scenes, and how a culture of internal politics and poor leadership is damaging policing from the inside out. What prompted you to launch the crowdfunding campaign in support of PC Lawn Castle? I've seen at least 8 years very proactive and experienced good cops in Dorset Police over the past 2 years lose their job to ramped up gross misconduct charges when at the very most they were guilty of misconduct or words of advice. Matters all overseen and signed off by someone who is now subject to allegations of gross sexual misconduct himself. I couldn't continue to sit back and see yet another one unfairly bite the dust. Lorne is an amazing guy. You only need to see the public's response and the hundreds of supportive messages we've received, along with some pretty honest and humble media appearances, to know what kind of person he really is. I remembered the success of the fundraiser for the 2 Met officers over the Bianca Williams debacle and thought if I could just raise enough to see Lorne and his family through some dark days, then why not try and do the same for Lorne? I don't think anyone imagined we'd receive the response we had. It's just incredible, and I can't thank everyone who supported or donated to this cause enough. As someone who served in Dorset Police at a senior level, what was your immediate reaction when you heard the outcome of the misconduct hearing? Surprised? Not surprised. Surprised that the ACPO officers leading this farce couldn't see the reputational risk to the organisation if they found Lorne guilty of something which, let's face it, you see far worse in requalification every 12 months on the officer safety training mats. That they couldn't foresee the backlash from serving and retired colleagues and the predicament it would put their frontline officers in. And more importantly, the huge hit they'd take in trust and confidence from an astute public already angry at increasing knife crime and antisocial behaviour epidemic in our town centre. But perhaps their lack of operational experience and complete disconnect from their junior ranks and the public at large have come to the fore here. Not surprised, because I prepared Lorne the week before that it was already a done deal. It was clear from the moment that Ricky Dander went against the advice of the officer safety training team, my former department, and his own investigators that they were looking to make an example of Lorne as they'd done to others previously. Add to that the fact that a promotion-seeking inspector, who I'm extremely disappointed in, took it away from Lorne's sergeant when he was actually dealing with it as reflective practice, and a former head of PSD, a highly respected retired chief inspector re-employed as a civilian, actually retired early. Such was his disgust at this decision, which was just one of a long line of inappropriate and disproportionate case decisions made by Dander. And lastly, DCC Farrell's comments post-finding, I knew all along, which appeared to indicate that the decision had already been taken long ago. What are your thoughts on Dorset Police decision to release a partial clip of the body-worn footage rather than the full video? I thought it was pretty low and ill-thought-through decision, to be honest. It was clearly done to try and dissuade the public and Lorne supporters from continuing to back him and to garner support for themselves. It failed spectacularly. It just made the public rally around Lorne and his family even more. They saw right through it. In just under 4 hours, it raised another £10,000 for the fund and an additional £20,000 by the following day. As for the clip itself, many people, including myself, thought, is that it? Is that the worst 2 minutes you could find? They only need to learn from the public's reaction to the Manchester airport footage to know this wasn't a good idea. But apparently the Police and Crime Commissioner, was supportive of, according to this interview recently on BBC Radio Solent. Do you believe PC Castle's actions warranted dismissal, or should it have been dealt with via reflective practice? 100% it was reflective practice or words of advice that his sergeant was actually undertaking. So why on earth would it get taken away from him to reach the heights it did? I'd go further to say that I'd have given Lorne a commendation for bravery. I might have said at the same time about the language he used, but for all intents and purposes, he was struggling on his own for some time with a violent offender and a crowd, partisan to the offender, gathering around him. He then discovered the offender had a knife on him, and not a small one that Dorset police tried to say he had. It's one of those oh shit moments, one that none of the command team has probably ever experienced. That's the problem. And that's what makes this scenario even more incredulous, because Bournemouth is currently suffering from violent crime at the hands of gangs of youth carrying all manner of weapons. We've had 4 murders in as many years of completely innocent members of the public going about their business in what was once the last great bastion of serenity beside the sea. And what do Dorset police do? They sack a decorated officer for trying to make Bournemouth a safer place. In what other world would you get the same outcome? What's your view on the fact that the complaint originated not from the public or the suspect, but from the 2 probationary officers within just a few months of service? Unfortunately, that's the culture that's being created. It's toxic and backstabbing. Shop a colleague or be at risk of being shocked yourself for not calling people out. It was heading this way when I walked out the door in 2022. Young kids are being employed from colleges and universities because a younger workforce is cheaper and easier to control than someone with Lorne's experience and service. Vetting is virtually non-existent. People are being given a start date having failed a previous interview but are not re-interviewed prior to starting, and people are allowed to pass out despite not achieving the required pass mark. It's no surprise it's in a right state. Set the bar low and this is what you'll get. I complained numerous times about the standards of recruits my department was being asked to train, but recruitment didn't care as long as their targets were being met. And when I say targets, I mean degree apprenticeship routes to enable Dorset police to claim the levy back from the government. If you are an underfunded force, you're always going to try and employ free officers. This is essentially what they are. Don't get me wrong, everyone has to start somewhere, but when I joined at 20, there was discipline, there were standards, and there were experienced officers to guide and shape you into a good officer. The experience that's left doesn't want anything to do with a new breed coming through, and how can you blame them? They have no experience of life, which was always a requirement, and they're simply not prepared for the rigours of policing. Not everyone can be a brain surgeon, right? It takes a special kind of person to do it. I understand that one of the 2 to report Lorne has since left the police service. That just about sums it up. That and the fact that there are 2 victims at the heart of all this, and I'm beginning to question if they themselves were treated appropriately. Lorne did his bit, but I don't think his colleagues did theirs. Importantly, the offender in this case, the one with the small knife, didn't complain because he was dealt with using the least amount of force necessary. He had no injury. This is actually pretty hard to achieve in such scenarios. The outcome was pretty much textbook. That's what is so ridiculous about this whole thing. And lastly, the public didn't complain because I believe they want police officers like Lorne. The alternative is not worth the $24,000 a year we are currently paying. In your opinion, what impact has this incident had on frontline morale within the force and among serving officers more broadly? I understand it's pretty much destroyed them. They were teetering on the brink as it was, but this has finished them. Their words, not mine. I've had officers stop me in the street and message me simply to say, thank you for what you are doing for Lorne, but also for us too. No one else is defending them. I thought that's what the Federation were there to do. There needs to be a comprehensive review of UK policing. They are hemorrhaging officers to the Australian forces and the private sector. It is no longer a career or vocation, it's just a job. And the powers that be are happy with that. Wages on the cheap and no likelihood of officers unlocking any form of pension. The entire promotion system needs overhauling when good, honest, hard-working officers wanting to do their best are led by individuals who climbed over and destroyed people to get to the top. They are undeserving of being called leaders. In a recent survey led by the Police Federation, 79% of Dorset police officers said they would not recommend their job to anyone, and a large number were looking at alternative career options. How's that for your next recruitment campaign? And this is the state of the British police is not something that I see being sorted out anytime soon. So it's just going to get worse and worse. And I mean, to give you a sort of idea of how kind of widespread stuff like this is now, I live in Exeter, which is one of, I would say, what I would have thought was one of the nicest, safest cities in the whole of the UK. And the other day, apparently, the police had to taser some guy because he was just attacking people with a hammer in the high street in the middle of the day. And to reinforce what that guy was saying in the interview earlier, I also the other day saw a policewoman who was just, I mean, she was obese. I would guess that her BMI, from taking one look at her, would definitely put her in the obese category. And if you're a cop and you can't run and chase a criminal, then you can't really do your job, can you? But that's what happens when the standards are 5.5 on the bleak test, which is anyone can get that. It's just you're buried. It's walking. I mean, because obviously I used to be in the fire service, so I do have some experience of being in the emergency services. And yeah, if you can't deal with a little bit of shouting and bad language, you're probably in the wrong job. But yeah, if you've got any of your own examples of anarcho-tyranny in the UK, chuck them in the comments. And thanks for watching. Sorry, it was quite black-pilling.